All right, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining the live Jetpack show, episode number 1. This is a show where we talk real IT business. I'm your host, Jeff Hallish. Today we'll talk about what makes your business tick and what do your customers really want from you, and also what is the difference between consultants, break-fix techs, and managed service providers, along with the pros and cons of each model. If you guys watched the pre-show, you're probably wondering what spaghetti sauce has to do with IT business. Stay tuned for that. We have a hand-picked panel for you guys today. We have Scott Young from Flexity. We have Pierre Roman from Microsoft Canada. We also have Corey Fruitman from Instant Housecall, Ian Alexander from Repair Tech, and Ken Dwight, the Virus Doctor. Stick around after the show for live demos and AMAs from our sponsors. Should be a good time. If you haven't already, please log into the chat to share your thoughts with the rest of the Jetpack audience. We love that feedback. A quick reminder to register for the in-person Jetpack meetup in Chicago. We'll be piggybacking on the CompTIA conference August 3rd through the 6th, where you'll meet me, Jetpack sponsors, and other techs who watch this show. You guys can register for that and escape from the room with real zombies by clicking Connect at the top of the Jetpack page. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. All right, so I think what we're going to do is we have, I want to go over a couple things and kind of get the conversation started with what we're doing. One is the entrepreneurial myth. And what I mean by that is if everybody out in the audience has not read E-Myth Revisited, go and buy the book on Amazon, buy it on Audible, get it any way that you can, and read that book because it will definitely change your mind in how your business needs to be run, and it will give you some insight into things you're doing right and things you're doing wrong. One of the myths is that entrepreneurs are heroes with some grand vision. Gosh, I wish I was a hero, and I wish I had a grand vision, but the reality is that is just not true. All right, let me go over a couple of statistics, and then we'll kind of talk about this. Most started working for someone else and said, I can do it better than my boss. 80% fail in the first 5 years. That, to me, is a sad, sad statement. Careful who you emulate. Sometimes you can't play like the big boys, and you probably shouldn't because everybody is at a different level. And then work on your business, not in your business. Processes and organization and all these things that we talk about in our daily business. And this is something that I was just thinking about yesterday. And to me, business is really 90% mindset and 10% work. I mean, once you get the processes and organization down, really the work is kind of the same in a lot of what we do. But building a business is way different. So who wants to start off and kind of talk about this, what you guys think about the entrepreneurial myth?
Well, I mean, in terms of the idea that entrepreneurs are like you said, heroes with some huge vision, I think that's I think there are some people who definitely start out that way, and I think when we all start our business, we feel very passionate about it. I know I do. I still do about my own business, but in terms of actually running a business as a business as opposed to as a technician, and that's actually something that's covered in the book. They use the terms technician, manager, and entrepreneur. They talk about how those are all things that those are all pieces of ourselves that are constantly fighting with each other. I think a lot of people, especially techs, will start out as a technician for somebody else, and they'll carry on those habits, and it's not necessarily conducive to a business.
Gotcha. Hey, Corey, you might need to you might either need to replug in. Your microphone's kind of fading out there, sidelining a little bit.
Okay, cool.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I would say that in general, there are a couple stereotypes of entrepreneurs. Not every entrepreneur is going to have the vision. Some are better with people, some are better with technology, and it's very hard to find somebody who has the ability to lead a company in the various stages of a company, which is, I know, one of the later topics here. But it's just an interesting thing because I think that entrepreneurship in certain eras of our country when the economy is, say, a little better and people can take risks, get um, mysticized a little bit, and people think that it is some kind of superhero thing, when in reality it's just more like working way harder than everybody else, and having the ability to not die. I mean, that is really, because the entire entrepreneurial thing is, I don't know what I'm doing, and so I have to figure it out, and that is a constant. Um, I don't have normal hours like everyone else, and that is a constant. And I'm the only one who's responsible for my destiny. And of course, you have a team, and you can share that, right? That load amongst your team. But the only thing that separates, I think, normal entrepreneurs and I should say that the thing that makes good entrepreneurs is that they're a little crazy. So I wouldn't say that they're heroes, but I do think from all the entrepreneurs that I have met that entrepreneurs that are successful and start businesses that are impactful and make a difference are all a little crazy. And most of the time when somebody says, "Oh, I'm trying to, start a company that's going to compete against Facebook or something," if they're not crazy, I don't believe them.
Good point.
The other thing that leads into is that pretty much every successful entrepreneur is a risk taker. Everybody that has that gene in them knows that they could fail, and it's one of those things that if I don't try it, I'll never know. And it's kind of the opposite of the government employees or people that work for a big company with a lot of benefits and security and that sort of thing, which, not to knock those companies, it just it's a different mindset among entrepreneurs. And you hear the term serial entrepreneur, which I think is a pretty cool term, because it just designates that, at least my interpretation, is somebody's started one venture, and whether it's been a great success or a complete flop, they've started another one, and then another and another, and some great stories along those lines.
There are some people who are good serial entrepreneurs and some people who aren't good serial entrepreneurs.
That's true, too.
Well, I think another aspect of that is that, like Ken mentioned, there's this aspect of you being able to take that risk. And I think that the entrepreneurs that I have met that I'm always impressed by don't think about it in the same way. For someone who is not as entrepreneurial or not as naturally inclined to be so, they may consider that a risk. Whereas for other people, yeah, I mean, statistically it's a risk, but you are either so confident or just so crazy that you don't really consider it a personal risk. So, for example, I don't really think, I know 9 out of 10 startups fail within 2 years. And I know that of those, how many of them become Google? 0.1% or Microsoft, but nonetheless, when I wake up every morning, I don't think that I can't do that, even though that's not realistic, right?
Well, it's not always about becoming a giant company like that, though. Like a lot of us, myself included, don't. I don't aspire to have a giant corporate office with big letters on some big building. I think there's a lot of value to being small, and I think that value is sometimes overlooked.
I want to hear what Pierre and Scott also have to say, because they come from a little bit different part of the industry, and I'm very interested because there's a lot that's going to correlate between the stuff we're talking about. So Pierre, what we're going to say?
I was going to say sometimes entrepreneurs think that they have to do it all themselves, which I think is a mistake. I have been in my career, I've been in IT for a long time. So I have had my own company, and I've worked for small businesses and small integrators, and I've moved on to large service providers, and now I'm with Microsoft, one of those big companies with lots of buildings with our names on it. So I've seen pretty much like the whole gamut of things, and in my experience especially with small businesses, somebody who's starting a business or an entrepreneur, they think that they need to do it all themselves, and the key to success, in my view, is to to know that you can't do it all yourself, and to basically team up with somebody, like play to your strength. So if you are the technical guy that absolutely has all the technical answers, but you're not a manager, and I know I've been managers, and I've been an IT director for a multinational covering all of Canada and Northeast US. It wasn't for me. It's not that I wasn't good at it, it's just I didn't like it at all. So what things you don't like, typically you don't do very well because you're trying to just get rid of them so you can get back to the stuff you like. So knowing what your strengths are, and knowing and having the ability to surround yourself with people that have different strengths that complete the big picture is one thing that'll make your entrepreneur venture much more likely to succeed.
Absolutely. I definitely agree with that. And Scott, what are your thoughts?
I was going to say along the same lines as Pierre that really what it boils down to is you have to play to your strengths. And 9 out of 10 people who go out to start their company do it because they have a great idea, or they think they've built a better mousetrap, or they think they're better at something. That does not necessarily mean they're the best salesperson, they're the best manager, they're the best person to get that message out there. You do have to surround yourself with people who can fill those roles that you are weak at. One of the greatest strengths as an entrepreneur, I would think, is to understand what it is you're strong at, where you need help, and be able to find that help.
Absolutely. I think that's an essential part of building the business. And I've said this many times, but a lot of people are good technicians, but as far as running a business, we're not very good at that because we don't sit there, like you said, Scott, and sit there and think about what we're good at, what we're not good at, and we really need to do those types of things in order to grow that business. Because like Pierre said, that's one of those things that's going to make you I know that for myself, if there's something I don't like to do, like Pierre said earlier, I'm probably not going to, I'm going to do it just to get by. But when you can hire somebody to do that, whether it's a contract worker or, even hire somebody in your company, you can absolutely do that. And I think it makes a lot more sense because one person a lot of times cannot do everything they need to do. They need to surround themselves with people. And
add to that.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think that you guys are all hitting on really good stuff, and if I could only add one thing, it's like you're never going to know everything, ever. So, and being an entrepreneur, the natural status of that is you're outside of your comfort zone, and you don't know what you're doing. And if you're not, then you're not growing fast enough. So, because the moment you get comfortable, if you are growing fast enough, you should be thrust into a different role and somebody else should be replacing you. So the only thing that you can do, because you're not going to know anything if you're growing fast enough, is surround yourself with people who know what you don't. So that could be advisors or team members, and talking to your customers. Because your customers and your advisors are the only people who are ever going to be able to point you in the right direction. And otherwise you're going to make mistakes. So yeah, I would just say talk to your customers as much as possible.
I think talking to the customers is one thing, but also finding yourself a mentor, somebody who's already in the business, somebody that you respect and that you trust to bounce ideas off of. Then they're not going to turn around and steal your idea, for example, because that does happen. But having somebody who's established, or just somebody who's already gone through the pain points, and a lot of times is something that we forget to do because we think we can figure it all out. And it doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to make your own decision. It just means that you get somebody else's perspective.
Right.
I agree with Pierre completely on that in saying as well, listening to the customer. Listening to the customer is great, but if you're only listening to the customers you have, you're missing the rest of the market. Having a mentor gives you that outside perspective that's beyond what you're doing.
I have a quote that I listen to often, and it's, experiences are the best teacher as long as they're somebody else's experience.
I'd like to piggyback on those 2 points. So in terms of finding a mentor, I think it's very important, but I think sometimes you run into trouble when you find a mentor who's in the industry. So in my case, I go to, it's called Associated Senior Executives. It's a bunch of retired CEOs, and they're in completely different industries. And I talk about my business with them, and because they're from outside and looking in, their perspectives are vastly different. I think it's very important to have people inside the industry, but having sometimes we become an echo chamber, and you surround yourselves with all the same people. I think there's a lot of value to getting that outside perspective. And actually, to Scott's point about listening to your customers, you should absolutely always listen to your customers. Sometimes, though, they can point you in the wrong direction. You need to make sure that you're listening and that whatever they're suggesting or requesting matches your vision for your own product as well, or your own service.
Well, and I think to Scott's point too is that you need to reach outside just the customer base that you're serving, because you might not know what's needed out in the industry. What needs to be worked on right now. What are people's needs? Why do people need your product or service? And sometimes you've got to go outside to be able to find those things.
In the U.S., there's an organization that most of you are probably familiar with called SCORE, which is the Service Corps of Retired Executives. And they're associated with the Small Business Administration. And they're generally thought of as being there to work with startups and help people that are new to the idea of starting their own business. But just as an example, I was working with a SCORE counselor last year. I started my business in 1972. So not exactly a new business. and I hear the first 44 years are the toughest, so I'm still working on that.
So the next 44 are a breeze, right?
That's what I hear. I'll let you know. But if anybody's not familiar with SCORE, just check your local, showing my age again, check your phone book. Get on the internet and just look for SCORE, and it's probably SBA.org. I don't know that for sure, but it's a government agency, and they have multiple locations in most of the major cities, and even some smaller ones too.
Oh, very cool.
Ken, why don't you put a link to that on your sponsor page so people can find it easily?
All right, if I can find my sponsor page.
We also worked with SCORE. They were great.
Yeah, we can deal with that after the show. So anyways, I think we've come up with a lot of good scenarios. Does anybody, before we move on to the next topic, does anybody want to add anything that they haven't added so far that they want people to think about?
I think in a lot of cases we don't give the power of the community enough weight. And by community, I mean get to your local meetup and talk to other entrepreneurs that are in the same region, not necessarily in the same industry, but in the same region. Get to user groups, because I remember when I started one of my first companies, that was a long time ago, but still there were some user group events out there for IT that I connected with, and I was able to do some subcontracting for somebody that was there. And that led to a customer that then, after the subcontracting contract was over, that then called me back and said, hey, I need something else. And it kind of allowed me to start a client base without having to sit at my desk and put some ads on the internet or in the local paper back then and just wait for the phone to ring. Or if you do like doing the cold calls. So going out there and meeting, the Chamber of Commerce is really good, but meetups these days are everywhere, and you can typically find something in your area. And I know the scores and talking to those people sometimes is great, but if you want to do somebody local and have a face-to-face and like shaking hands and kissing babies type deal, those are some things that we tend to not put enough weight on. So the power of that community, getting involved with that.
That's a really good point. And coming back to the other thing we were talking about, sometimes it's good to have people that are inside your industry and to kind of rub shoulders with them. But sometimes when you do that, you can get into kind of a situation where it's a bunch of people in the same industry who kind of all have a pity party because the economy or this or that or the other. And sometimes it's neat to get the outside perspectives of not only community but of other entrepreneurs that are out there that are doing something different, because let's face it, there's always businesses that are succeeding and always businesses that are maybe not doing so well at the time. And we base a lot of those things on our outside influences, the economy in the area or whatever. And a lot of times those things aren't necessarily true. We just have to think outside the box with what we're doing with our particular business. Scott, you got anything to add to that? You seem like you got something to...
No.
Okay.
I think pretty much most of this has been covered.
All right, I'll tell you what, let's go ahead and, hopefully you guys got something out of that. Let's move on to the next subject. And the next subject we're going to talk about is, and this should be interesting, is this notion of there are three portions, I guess, to this industry. And we have the break fix, we have consultants, and we have managed services. And we've got everybody from the beginning, like myself, to all the in-between and, large companies like Microsoft. But let me break these down a little bit. First of all, here's what Wikipedia says about break fix. It says, break fix. The term break fix refers to the fee-for-service method of providing information technology repairs to businesses in which a customer calls up a service provider to do an upgrade of a computer program, software, product, computer, or repair of something computer-related like a printer or drive array that is broken. The IT provider offers a solution or repair and bills the customer for the work done. That is the definition for break fix. And we'll get into it in a minute. The definition for consultant, and I think I got this from a dictionary, is basically a person who gives professional or expert advice. And, a lot of people think about an expert and they think, well, what is really an expert? And in my opinion, an expert is somebody that knows something that the rest of the people in the room don't. That's really the only thing that makes them an expert. If you know a little bit more than the other person, like we were talking about earlier, if you get a mentor that can help you kind of get through some of the hard spots, then you can do that a little bit easier. Third one is managed services. The alternative to break fix is managed services, which is basically a service plan where the customer pays a regular fixed amount for all general maintenance and only pays for extraordinary or extreme repairs or unusual conditions. The equivalent practice in the consumer market is out of warranty appliances, where the customer can pay for repairs as needed, or they can buy an extended warranty. So I want to talk about, now this is obviously the Wikipedia and the dictionary. And this is not the gospel per se, but I want to hear everybody's thoughts on how they perceive each of these, and maybe what are some of the pros and cons to doing business one way versus another.
Honestly, being in the industry myself, I don't see that you can really split them and have a successful business in this industry. I think you do need some mix of all three revenue streams. When you look at it, break fix is very bursty. The revenue you're going to get, you can't necessarily count on from day to day. You run around and you try to fill in those break fix things, but hey, if you've done your job really well and no one's stuff is breaking, where's your revenue? A managed services type of model is sold to a customer as insurance. You have insurance that your network is going to be up. You're paying me whether it breaks or not, so that when it does break, I can make sure it's up, and I can do everything I can do for you to make sure it's not going to break. That at least gives you that steady revenue stream underlying. It's a harder sale, it's a longer sale, but it's also a necessity to keep that revenue stream coming in that can keep your doors open when the burstiness of the other revenue streams aren't necessarily there. Building on top of those two, I see the consultant role really as a trusted advisor. Your consultancy role, you can either take that down two roads. You can either be the consultant who comes in and does work, or you can be the consultant who comes in and recommends work to be done. It doesn't necessarily exclude you from being that customer's to do that work, but really getting that level of trust from the customer to be that trusted advisor so that they believe you when you tell them you've lived this before, you know this, and you can lead them down the right path for stability for their business, because really they want to run their business. You need to help them with the technology so that they can do what they need to do. Same way when talking about being an entrepreneur, you may know the technology really well, you may not know sales. Well, hey, they may know how to sell Murphy beds really well. They just don't know how to get that website up to get out to their market. You're the one who's supposed to be giving them that trusted advisor business to tell them how to keep this up and let them worry about how they're going to do what they're going to do. If you stick in one of those three things, I don't think necessarily you can keep the business growing as well as you would want. The closest is managed services. If you can keep those customers going, you just have a steady, stable revenue stream. But if you need to grow it, if your customers, if you're a managed service provider and your customers don't trust you to be that consultant role, I don't think you've done your job necessarily as well as you could have. And if you just break fixing, maybe the issue is the customer base you're playing in isn't able to grow to the level that you want to get the stability of income that you would like.
Excellent points. Very excellent points. I like all those. All right, Pierre, what do you think?
Well, I think it's. I agree with Scott. I think the roles are an evolution of each other. So if you're just coming into the business, if you're just starting that first company, it's going to be really, really hard to identify yourself as a consultant or as a service provider if you're brand new to the market. So unless you've got a tremendous amount of prior experience that you can leverage and prior recognition or industry recognition that you can leverage to back up your claim that you're a consultant and you know more than all your customers, and you're not just and then I've seen a lot of those in my days where they're like one textbook ahead of the client. So you can start as a break fix, and as you become more proficient and your business is growing a little bit, then the customers that you've been servicing and fixing their stuff that's broken, you can transition them to a service type providing, the service provider type of role, where you say, hey, you've called me like 5 or 6 times for these issues. How about we set up a contract where I'll come back on a regular basis and make sure that that does not happen. So you start with the break fix, you grow into a service provider role, and as you're doing that, you're gaining experience that you can then provide to third parties or other customers as consultants, where, okay, this is what I've seen in other areas, this is my expertise, whether it's setting up a website, setting up an infrastructure, migrating somebody to a cloud service, for example, and say, I've seen it, I've done it, I know where the pitfalls are, let me guide you through it. So you become a consultant, whether either in a service provider role or break fix, but I don't think you can cut them out or slice them out individually. I think one role is an evolution of the other, and they kind of merge into each other as part of a growing business.
Absolutely. So, what I'm getting so far is that you definitely don't want to stick wherever you're at. You definitely want to keep moving forward. You want to, like Pierre said, the revolution or evolution of the business definitely is very important to what you do. So it's one of the things I always say. I don't want to get stagnant in what I do. I always wanted to make I want to make it better and be able to cover my customers better. The other thing is, a lot of times people don't realize these break fix opportunities a lot of times will lead into also business opportunities, because not only do a lot of people that you might fix their computer, they might own a small business, or they actually own a small business and they work out of their home, but sometimes you'll get these contracts because of who you know. And I think a lot of people forget that in this industry. Life pretty much is a lot about who you know and who you come into contact with. So I look at the break fix, like you guys have said, as a lifeblood of getting to the other businesses and different things like that. Ken, what's your thoughts on what we're talking about here?
Well, I thought Scott made some great points, and more breaking down the different categories, and also the idea of an evolution from one to the other. My business is a combination of break fix and consulting, and most of my clients that I work with individually like that are typically not at a revenue level or a mindset level to be really interested in an MSP type contract, or it's more, well, I'll call you when I've got a problem, and whether it's the cash flow issue or just don't think they'll need it or whatever. So I tend to do some of each with the consulting and break fix. Just the clients I've worked with in the last week have been some of each. In fact, in some cases, you'll go you deal with a client for one issue and then something else comes up, and that's exactly what happened with one the other day. That they had a problem, their printer wasn't working. Went there, and while you're here, we've got this other issue, which was more of a consulting opportunity. So it is a mix of both. And I'll tell you that as Scott pointed out, the idea of having that steady guaranteed revenue, an MSP type contract, there's a lot of appeal to that, but also it's not something that, as you said, it's a longer sell. And the other thing that unfortunately I've seen with some of the MSPs I've dealt with is it tends to be kind of a complacency issue. We got their money, we don't really have to take care of them. And of course that leads to losing the client after that contract term is up. So, and I've seen that reflected in some clients' attitudes. Well, I used to have one of these service contracts, and they didn't respond. And so if you are an MSP, I think it's important to do it right and have the SLAs and take care of customers, obviously, as well as looking for new business all the time.
Very good. And I think a lot of people, when it comes to MSPs, a lot of times, is a lot of people think that they can just basically set up some, software or different things to, basically take care of that computer, and then they figure they can do it for cheap. So they will charge a cheaper price, but then they don't realize that it's actually going to take time to sit back and look at what's going on each of those machines, whether it be printers, workstations, all these different things that you need to look at on a regular basis, and you need to really charge accordingly. And I think a lot of people will, they do these cheap things, and then they say, well, hey, everything seems like it's working good, or my dashboard tells me everything is okay, but the reality is it's got to be more than that. And people are willing to pay for service as long as they're getting the service. Ian, what do you have to say with this?
I have mixed feelings about it. Look, I agree with everything everybody has said so far. I don't think that there is one right answer. I think that it depends on your business, and it depends on the area you're in, and it depends. I don't know if anybody has looked at the business model canvas before, but if you go to businessmodelgeneration.com, there's a cool poster you can print out, or you can just use it on your computer that helps you think about business models. And the three most important boxes in that are customer segments, value propositions, and revenue streams. The difference between a break-fix shop and a managed service provider is not very much. I think people overemphasize the difference. The difference is just revenue stream. It's just the way you charge the customer. You're doing the same stuff. So, I mean, there might be some tools that vary a little bit, but for the most part, we're talking about the same kind of business here. So what I think you need to do is, first of all, look at the customer segments that are available to you. So you may not have enough big businesses in your area that you may not be able to do an MSP play. So you need to look at that. You need to also look at how many people are competing with you. So if nobody's addressing the residential market in your area, that may actually be better for you revenue-wise. And look at how the businesses in your area, if you want to go for B2B, are willing to pay you. So you look at the customer segments, and then you say, what am I good at? So what value can I provide to the people that are in my area that could be my customers? And you say, well, I'm going to play to those strengths. And then you take those values and those customers and you say, how can I charge these people for this value? And I think that's how you should decide what you should do. After all of that, then you've got to decide what you want to build, right? Because you may have a couple options, and maybe you don't want to build a big business. Maybe you want to be small, or maybe the other way around, and that's going to kind of influence things too. So I kind of get a little, like I said, I have mixed feelings when people try to say, oh, you need to get into managed services, or this is better than that, because it's just absolutes like that they're not realistic. and it just depends on the situation you're in. So I agree in the sense that I think that for most businesses it makes sense to have all three. I think that if you're not consulting people, even if you aren't charging them for it, but if you're not consulting people, you're probably not doing a very good job. And if you are only doing break fix, you're probably missing out on some opportunities for MSP stuff and vice versa. So I agree. I just think that there's a it depends is my answer.
I agree with everything that Ian has said there. The only statement that I would slightly disagree with is that break fix and MSP are the same thing. Basically, if you are running, you're using the same technologies, agreed, you're using the same industry, you're using the same customer base. I agree with those statements, but if you want to charge a customer a premium for an MSP, you can't just be a break fix shop. You have to have a value prop for them as to why and what. It is an insurance policy to ensure that they don't go down, and that doesn't mean, hey, you're paying me a flat monthly fee, and when things break, I'm going to come in and fix them just like I normally would, because why would I pay you that flat monthly fee then? You have to have a value proposition that says that you will be giving them that something extra. If you don't give them that something extra, then what value do they have that they want to pay for? We use in our business what are called statements of exercise. So the customer knows exactly what it is they're getting. You say, here's what I'm monitoring, here's what I'm doing, here's what my statement of exercise says that I am doing for you on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. These are the things that you don't have to do for yourself that I will help validate that you are running in a proper fashion, that you are working, and so that I can catch it before it breaks. That's that kind of step between a break fix and a managed service, which, yes, is it's a better revenue stream, but it also does mean that you have to have that that workforce, that task force sitting there on these things on that daily, weekly, monthly basis, outside of, say, a break fix where you may be able to do a lot of it yourself because it's bursty and you run from one job to the next. And no, you can't just have a set of tools sitting there and hey, my dashboard says it's fine. If you're doing that, you will lose your customer. That will happen.
Yep. No, and I always equate to, if you look at just break fix in itself, if all we're doing is break fix, it's like, to me, it's like being a car salesman, right? In order to make the same amount of revenue every month, I have to sell a certain amount of cars. Well, it's the same thing with if you're doing break fix only, you have to basically fix so many computers or machines in order to have a certain revenue coming in, and that sometimes can be tough because, like a lot of you have said on this panel, is that is not consistent. So I think it's a lifeblood, but I also think, like I said before, is that you need a little bit of both, and you really got to have some of those. But again, like Scott said, it's a trust issue. You got to create that trust, and you've got to do what you set out to do, and give the customer that value. Corey, what do you have to say about this whole issue? I know you've got a lot to say, so go for it.
I mean, I agree with both Ian and Scott, but I think they're talking about a slightly different market. So
Agreed.
There are small MSPs, and there are MSPs the size of Flexity. And just to give it a little bit of a frame, Scott, how many people are at Flexity?
We're a 120 employee company, 120 million in revenue.
Whoa.
Right. So there are MSPs and there are MSPs, and so Flexity is when Scott's talking about some of the stuff that he disagrees with, I think it's a question of the definition of MSP or managed service provider or whatever. So I think there's a very big disconnect between those two types. I don't even know if they have different names. I think the overlap between break-fix consulting and managed services is huge, especially on the smaller end. When you start getting to the larger end, like where Scott is, it's a little bit different.
I'd call that a super
100% agree. No, well, we're a small fish in a big pond, let's say. We compete against the IBMs and the HPs, so we're a small fish in the big pond. And I agree we're addressing a different part of the market here, and definitely scale is different. But I think the underlying truths are the same. What you need to give your customer, how you need to service your customer, and that in a managed service type play, you do need to give them something extra than that break fix. They're not going to pay a monthly service just so that you can be there for break fix. They could have just paid you break fix for that. So you do have to define that something extra and what it is for your market. Because, yeah, the market sizes are different. That may change, and it may be different than what Flexity has to provide to their market, but it still has to be there. That's something that defines why I'm willing to pay you recurring revenue.
And Scott, as a managed service provider, you guys still do the regular break fix too, also, right?
Correct.
Okay.
The main difference between the markets that we tend to work in as Flexity and that the listeners here would most likely be working in, the main difference is we kind of cut ourselves off after desktop, so we don't touch users and below. We work solely on service and infrastructure.
Okay.
The model's the same. We're just working that one step up the ladder for medium or large size businesses. So our target market would be minimum of 100 to 200 servers and going up from there.
Yeah, definitely different market. But I think from anybody's standpoint that's starting out, so you can see from the beginning, you can start off as a single technician or what they call a solopreneur, and then kind of move up into and get to the size company that Scott has. It takes time in industry in doing these things and moving forward. But I think one of the things, Corey, did you have anything to add to that?
I guess if we're talking about the smaller market, I think the smaller market and smaller managed services shop, I see it all the time in my businesses. And to be clear, I've got lots of break fix, lots of consultants, and lots of managed service providers. So it's not related to my business specifically, but in terms of, I do see a lot of guys who have aspirations to be a managed service provider, and they often run into trouble because the sales cycles are longer. It's expensive to get that recurring revenue. It's expensive to lose that recurring revenue. It's a model that if you're going into on the smaller end, that can be very challenging for smaller shops.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where, again, this is going to show my age, but don't put all your eggs in one basket. I mean, that's been around since way before I was ever born, and there's a reality to that. You can't really put all your eggs in one basket because, if you have some MSPs, and I've heard different technicians talk about this, is that if they have a large person that's on their managed service, and that person goes away, they would rather have little managed services, so that if one goes away or a couple go away, it doesn't really affect their revenue. They can replace those. But sometimes when you have one that's taking a majority amount of your time, 60% or more, and that person goes away, you've just lost 60% of your revenue, and you're done. So you've got to have something to fall back on and something that you can, work in there.
Fully agree with that, and we're in the same boat. You want to lose a big customer, it's the same thing. We have the same type of issues with all your eggs in one basket. The other thing I'd like to put in towards that is if you're trying to build towards a managed service, or at least to get some managed services customers in, the worst mistake that I've seen made is build it and they will come on. You can't buy the tool and then expect people to want to use it. You have to exhaust your resources before you spend the money to buy that tool that you think is going to give you everything you need. Tools are 100% necessity. They're important, but you can't buy a tool and expect people to want it. You have to have the service that they're going to need. You expend all the effort that you can, and you use that tool to multiply your work effort into being more employees, or your more employees making them better at what they do.
So Scott, I believe what you're saying is that you might need to start off with a manual process where you're doing a lot of these things manually, and then you get to a point where your customer base is taking so much time that you can actually buy a tool that's going to not only automate but kind of sit in the background and do some of those processes that you were doing manually, and then you can look at it from a different perspective. But yeah, you definitely don't want to spend money for something. I see this happen all the time. we're talking about big businesses and stuff, and sometimes we try to play with like the big boys, and we don't have the the revenue, the advertising revenue that Microsoft has. Let's just say. And so with that being said, so we have to do things at whatever level you're at, and that's okay.
We actually run on new customers significantly manual processes. We use a lot of open source tools. We've been in business 10 years, and our main monitoring software is still based on open source. It's still a modified version of Nagios and Cacti. You don't have to buy a tool necessarily to do the job. Sometimes you do need a tool, but that doesn't necessarily mean you have to buy it. Sometimes buying is the best option. Other times, seeing what's out there based on your revenue streams. Open source should not be looked down upon or frowned upon. It is something that is a necessity in building businesses.
Absolutely. No, that's great. Yeah, people really need to think about that, because a lot of times there are tools, and I think a lot of us are used to using certain open source tools in what we do on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Jeff, just going back to something you said a little while ago, anytime that I'm dealing with one of my break-fix customers, which is frequently, one of the things that I generally leave them with is the request for referrals. Tell your friends, and I tell them every time I see you, I'm working myself out of a job.
Right.
Because if I do the job right, then they're not going to need me again anytime soon. And some of them say, well, why don't you plan to come back quarterly and just make sure? But most of them say, I'll call you when I've got a problem. And so it's not uncommon for me to go 6 months or a year between the times that I see a particular client. So that gets back to those cycles, and the gaps in the revenue streams, and the good times and bad, and whatever. So yeah, those are the times I would really like to have some of that MSP revenue.
Well, and I think we can all learn from what other, like we've all said before, and I think Pierre was bringing it up, that mentorship, or what we can learn from other people in the industry. And I think we've got a great panel to bring different perspectives, and we're all at different points in our businesses, in that, hopefully somebody can get the information out of what we're talking about here and go and help them to think differently. And really that's what this is about. Let me move into, I think we've kind of went through a lot of those, different, pros and cons, and I think we've come to the point of there's not really a whole lot of difference. And I believe personally that you do all three of those things in your business, or you should be, and even if you don't think you are, sometimes you actually are. But anyways, but let's talk about the pre-show video was spaghetti sauce. And what does spaghetti sauce have to do with your IT business? Okay, there's different tastes. Okay, you got to understand your customers' motivations, local market. Not one size fits all. You don't necessarily have to follow what everybody else is doing. Again, we've talked about strengths and weaknesses. Sometimes you've got to be a little bit different. And here's the thing: there's a bunch of customers out there that, if you watch a video, some don't even know what they want, and the ones that do, you'll be able to service both of them, because you can. Even though they don't know what they want, you can still give them a service that's going to help them. And so there's a lot to be said for people like different things. And they were talking about in the video, they were talking about some people like, creamy spaghetti sauce, some people like chunky, and this whole thing. If you haven't had a chance to watch that video after the show, definitely go and watch that video. It's very interesting and entertaining, and it really helps you understand. Again, this is all about mindset, right? We want to change how we think about our business, how we grow our business, and what it is we need to do on a day-to-day basis. So I don't know if you guys have watched the video here, but what do you have to say with that? There's different size businesses, there's diversity in market. We're all basically, we might have a different market that we are servicing at any given point.
It happens. I was having a conversation last week on a similar subject. This was with a guy that I worked with a long time ago, back when we were both programmers. I'm talking about the 70s. So, but one of the things that came out is this is still the same, because back then we both developed systems. What we would do is we were programmers. We were good programmers. So we'd write the code and give it to the users and say, here it is. And they'd say, well, how do I do so-and-so? I said, well, what? Why would you want to do that? And so the point is, the whole idea of asking the customer or the user what they wanted, or what they needed, or how they're doing things now just never occurred to us. And unfortunately, I still see that today with brand new software and especially new businesses that, like somebody said, you have a better mousetrap, and so surely the world will beat a path through your door. And I think the whole idea of doing that customer survey, or going to networking groups, or just asking, what do you need, what are you doing, what do you like, what do you not like, a lot of us don't listen too well.
Well, actually, this is a fantastic point. We don't listen too well. I was a consultant for many years. I deal with consultants on a regular basis. I find a lot of times the consultants are in a mindset where they go in there with a little bit of information because the customer called and said, "Here, I've got this problem. Come and see me and we can discuss the solution." And you walk in there with the preconceived solution in your head, and you're not really listening to what the customer team is telling you about their infrastructure, how they're doing things, why they're doing things. You're really trying to fit whatever they're saying around the solution you already have in your head. And I think this is doing both yourself and the customer a disservice. We need to be able, as people that move from a break fix, because break fix is pretty simple. Is the printer running? No. How? Why? Is it plugged in? Yes. Is the driver loaded? Yes. Like, is there toner? Like, you go through from general to specific and you eliminate the obvious until you've fixed it. But when you get into a managed services and consulting world, it's not quite that simple. So when you look at the tomato sauce or spaghetti sauce in the IT world, the same way where in the video he talks about, well, there's not one kind of great spaghetti sauce, is you have to be able to listen to your customer to say, okay, well, he doesn't like anchovies. All right. And figure out, what do I have that fits the need that doesn't include anchovies? And we often kind of come in with a preconceived idea and try to wrap our solution around what the customer wants, as opposed to trying to wrap what the customer wants around something that we can architect or present.
Totally agreed, actually. One of the common sales training courses you'll see in the larger companies focuses around, when you go into the customer, the first thing you should do is find out and listen to their pain points. They want to talk to you for a reason. You need to know what their problem is, what their pain is. Once you know their pain, then you can solve that problem. Don't go in with a menu of things that you're trying to shove in their face with dollar values on it. That's never going to work for you. The way that you sell that customer is to find out why they called you in the first place, why they're willing to talk to you, know what their pain is, then fit your solution to that pain.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a good point.
Back to what Pierre was saying, I think it's an old expression, but I think it's still valid. When your only tool is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So
that's great. Ian, what do you think?
I mean, I agree, completely agree. I think that there is a movement in the kind of the startup industry right now to talk about this concept of customer development. And if you're interested in this particular topic, I'd recommend pretty much anything by a guy named Steve Blank. One of the most popular ones is the Lean Startup. But the general concept is that you go into a business with, say, a hammer, and you have assumptions about what they want. And the point is to do customer development and basically interview them and understand what they actually need and prove your assumptions true or false. And the more assumptions that you have about your business that you can prove true or false, I have this many customers, this is what customers want, this is what they're willing to pay for it. All you have to do is you just keep interviewing people. I mean, Jeff, I've interviewed you for products we have or whatever, and tried to understand what you guys would like and what you would pay for it and those kinds of things, right? So
Right.
Doing those kinds of things then turns your assumptions into fact. And that's when you can actually be confident about the way that you're selling your products, because I interviewed 50 people, and 48 of them said they'd pay us this amount. And then okay, well, if I put out this marketing, people are going to listen to it. And so I think that's one of the ways that I would go about it is talking to customers and trying to prove true or false your assumptions.
Excellent. Corey?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the point or part of the message that I got from that spaghetti sauce video was the idea that customers don't necessarily know what they want and they can't always articulate what they want. Like the way he said, no one had ever asked for thick and chunky spaghetti sauce, but 1/3 of Americans wanted thick and chunky. And I think sometimes if you can sort of if you can tap into the creativity and try stuff out, just experiment a little bit. You can't always follow what everybody else is doing. That's it definitely makes sense to do stuff that works and that's proven. But I think you really differentiate yourself if you're able to imagine for a few minutes just what your customers might want that they might not be asking for.
Yeah, very good point. Well, it's like, I tell people out there all the time, from my standpoint, from my business, is that there's plenty of business to be had out there. In other words, I don't really care so much that I have competition even in my area, because there's going to be different customers for me. And if the customers are not happy with the way that I do things or the way that I'm helping them, then they can go find somebody else, and I'm perfectly fine with that. And I think a lot of people, a lot of times, they just take whatever they can get and whatever service people will buy, and they keep pushing that instead of going, like you guys have been saying, how do I find out what it is that you need? And I think that's very important in this industry, and I think it's just lost because we're so busy in our day-to-day things of whether it's doing break fix. I mean, for me, I work out of my home. I've got, after we get done today, I've got 3 computers I've got to handle. Now, for some companies, they'd say, oh, that's not a whole lot. For me, sitting here in my office, 3 computers to handle different things on is a lot. But, I'm trying to find out from my customers what it is they need and how I can best support them. And the ones that I build a relationship with, that's the type of business that I want. So I'm not going to build a relationship with everybody because that's just not realistic. But there's plenty of people out there that they might get better business from their standpoint. So yeah, a lot of good stuff here. Anyone else? Any final comments? Thoughts?
I think one of the things that the video also brought to mind to me is differentiating yourself is very important. And I think Scott touched on that, Ian touched on that, I think Corey and Kent, like we've all kind of touched on it in different ways. But if we bring that differentiation back to the topic at hand, which is entrepreneurs, IT folks, break fix consultant, one of the easiest way to differentiate yourself in our industry is certification, because you don't have to. Your customer or that guy that calls you the first time to say, hey, I'm having a problem, he's looking at the number of letters after your name or on your ad, and that kind of tells him, okay, he's never done work for me, but I trust these organization or I trust these certification that at least gives me he's got more letters than this guy on the second page. So I'll give him a try. So that's one kind of ways to differentiate yourself. Then the value added that Ian and Scott were mentioning are also, but whether or not it's CompTIA, whether or not it's MCSE, whether or not it's any kind of certification is key to differentiate yourself. That actually gets you into the door where you can listen to the customer, figure out whether they need they like the runny one or the thick and chunky, and then come up with a solution and then move on to being a consultant and eventually a service provider. I think it all ties in together. It's just a matter of being conscious of that and not rushing through the process.
Yeah, I think I think another differentiator is and a lot of people don't realize this, but this is actually it's human psyche and it's just the way it works, whether you want to believe it or not. sometimes the amount of money that we charge, if it's too low, and I'll be the first one to tell you I'm guilty of charging too low, and there's no value to that. You know, in the difference I say is, if you charge a little bit more or charge what the market will bear, you know, not the low end, not the mid, but you know, rate it where everybody else is, you know, and you've got the knowledge to back that up, then a lot of times people look at that and they say, you know what, this person's charging X amount, and they're not just looking for the cheapest deal all the time. They're like, I want somebody who's competent that can work on my stuff. And a lot of people don't realize that, you know, really those are really the customers that you should want, is the ones that are willing to pay you a fair wage to do what it is that they need done. And what you'll find is those customers are more than happy to pay that.
The customers that'll nickel and dime you are always customers that you don't want.
Yeah.
That was exactly what I was going to say. At that point, yes.
Gee, I was going to say the same thing.
If you're always charging that lowest price, the customer that you're going to have as your customer base is the customer who always wants only that lowest price.
Yes.
You want someone who sees your value more than someone who sees the dollar value. It has to be a balance between the two.
Yep, absolutely. Well, and I think sometimes people just perceive that you're going to do better work. You know, and this might not be true, but I've often said this too, is that a lot of times if you're charging a lower amount, then what'll end up happening is you get burnt out really quick, and you're like, man, this just is not worth it. But if you're charging something that's worth your time and effort, then that makes a big difference. So yeah, definitely a differentiator. And yet, going back to the certifications and stuff, here's what I've said, not to disagree with you, Pierre, but what I've said is if people want to work for somebody, I'm all about getting the certifications, and in full disclosure, I have none. But
you have one.
Well, yeah, that's true. I do have one. You're right, Ken. I forgot about that one.
You have one. You may not have all the certification, but if you have the experience, like the documented experience, that's worth just as much.
Yes.
Good point. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, very good point. Yeah, absolutely.
Much like a university degree will get you in the door when you're interviewing for a job.
Yeah,
exactly.
The certification is the same thing. They don't
Absolutely.
know you. This is something that levels the playing field. Then on the back end at a later date, the certifications you have help you with relationships with the vendors. And vendors generate leads. So playing in that space also does help later. If you've got a bunch of Microsoft certifications or Cisco certifications or different things within your small shop, they're more willing to work with you in a channel to generate leads and help you generate business as well.
Good point.
Also, if you're going to go after any kind of public contract, so if you want to support or offer managed services to your local municipal government, well, sometimes on their RFP they'll say mandatory requirements, a CompTIA or MCSE or some kind of certification, and a lot of times it's not a huge investment in money, it's an investment on time to actually take that certification, but it does pay back after a while.
Sometimes they'll say or equivalent.
Or
equivalent
equivalent.
experience.
Yeah, and I agree. You definitely have to have, you've got to either have that experience or, and I'm all about continuing education in any form. And, even without having the certs, I think that you can still take that continuing education to educate yourself on what's new and out there and, make yourself a better technician. Because, again, a lot of us have done things for the last, 20 years or whatever, doing things the same way we've always done them instead of trying to, keep up with the times. That's one of those things that I look at often. But anyways, I think, does anybody else have anything to add on this diversity of market that we have of helping different people in different markets and demographics?
Actually, I've got a question for Pierre because you mentioned RFPs. I've had customers ask me, like, where if you're a small shop, where do you find the RFPs? Is there a clearinghouse of some kind?
In Canada, there are different clearinghouse. Like the government has one called MERX. So I think it's merx.ca or something like that. I can't remember the exact URL. But you have to be you have to be kind of like pre-approved, or you have to go through Public Works to kind of register yourself to have access to see what the list of RFPs are. And to get on that list, you need to have to actually show credentials, because they don't want to, if there's a small contract that needs to go out, they don't want to have to go through thousands of RFP replies. They want to make sure that they get the RFP replies by a set of organizations that have already been vetted somewhat. So it's been a while since I had to answer RFP myself. But I do know that in terms of the public sector, they are, and typically on the website of the whichever government agency that you're trying to get contracts for, they normally would have announcements of that, or if it's in Canada for federal government, a service like Merck's that you have to subscribe to.
Now, what is an RFP?
Request for proposal.
Gotcha. Okay.
So basically, I can speak to this as well, having to deal in these all the time. Mercs is how you do get in through the government. Other RFPs, pretty much all other RFPs come our way, are through sales relationships. So we get asked to submit to an RFP. There's not generally, in a lot of the rest of the market, there's not generally a clearinghouse that just happens to have them. I would love it if there were, because that would help me drive my business too. Just doesn't happen to exist, unfortunately. A lot of it's through relationships. The request for proposal is generally when a medium to large size customer is starting a large project, and they'll put out a series of requirements to a group of people and say, I am looking for these things. These are the requirements I have. This is how I would like to see my service done. And they ask multiple people to then respond back to it as to how you would service this. They would generally then choose the best three, bring those in for trials, choose out of those three one to go forward with. That's the general RFP process. They're really going to market looking for, this is what I want, and how would you service this, and what are you going to charge me?
I think the issue sometimes is they ask you what they want, not necessarily what they need.
100% true. You don't find that until after you sign the contract, and then there's arguments.
Absolutely. And then there's change requests and...
Yes.
And of course, you always got to charge more for those, right?
Absolutely.
Anything outside what standard has to be a change request. Request should be built.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, I'll tell you what. I think what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick break here for those that need to go to the bathroom and whatnot. But what I would like to do is talk about the importance of having a vision. I want you guys to switch to the segue with the tab on the left. And here's one guy who had a clear vision and got the whole world to follow. And we'll see you all back here in 5 minutes for the question and answer session. Thanks for watching. Hey, Corey. Corey, I don't have any audio.
Can you hear me now?
Sure can.
Okay.
Ugh. All right. So I think when everybody gets back, we'll go ahead and everybody should have been able to watch the segue by now, and we'll get started in the question and answer session. Hey, Chris is asking who watched the segue, and of course you spelled it like the Segway that you ride. Uh, and he says, show of hands, you'll be in my good books if you did. Very cool. Yeah, it looks like a lot of people have watched the segue, getting some responses back there. You guys can talk. It's okay.
You're in charge.
We're waiting for Pierre and Scott, and as soon as they get back, we'll get the questions and answers started.
All right.
The questions are starting to come in, so that's cool. Yeah, guys, for those that are out there right now that are watching this live, go ahead. If you're not logged into the chat, go ahead and log into the chat, and you can ask your questions there. You can ask, this is pretty much an Ask Me Anything, so, within certain reason. But we'll preface that. But yeah, you can ask anything of anybody on the panel, or you can just ask a question in general, and then whoever has the expertise in that area, which probably won't be me, will answer that question. So. All right. And Scott's back with us. Ian's here too. He's just getting a bite to eat. So, is it good, Ian?
I mean, it's just cereal.
Oh, okay.
So.
I stopped eating cereal when I was like, 10.
Gotta stay young
somehow.
somehow.
Pints so young.
Yeah.
Scott, Scott, I got to ask you, have you read all those technical books behind you?
Actually, yes, the shelf to this side here, that's all mine. Middle is a combination. Those ones would be all language books of Becky's, so that doesn't really count. I haven't read those. I cannot speak even German or French.
What are the technical? What do the technical books cover? What types of things?
I am specifically networking and Linux systems. I came up in telco, so a lot of monitoring, a lot of Cisco devices, Juniper, things like that. Firewalls, routers, switches. That's my expertise.
Gotcha. That's a great expertise to have. Very cool.
Yeah, you got me this far.
So, Scott, are you still using that personally?
Yes, actually, I am a director of a managed services department right now. We got about 50 employees under us, and I'm still a tier 3, 4 technical resource for all my guys.
Very good.
All right. Looks like Pierre's back with us. So are you guys ready for the question and answer session?
Sure, bring it on.
All right. They're rolling in hot and heavy. All right. First question is, all the tech complexity is shifting to the cloud anyway, so there won't really be a need for traditional IT services that are typically executed on-prem. More business analyst type roles are what will be required as technology responsibilities and liabilities continue to shift with the big vendors, where your customers will prefer it to be. So I think what they're saying is, yeah, a lot of people are shifting to the cloud, and there's not really going to be a need for traditional IT.
I can speak somewhat to that because we actually have customers in that space as well. There are two schools of thought in the shift of that. There are the customers who don't want to give their data up to be out on a cloud, whether through regulations of government as to where that data has to be stored or the security of that data. Those people aren't necessarily moving to the cloud. We have, for example, some bank customers where they want the cloud experience to run for themselves, but they can't move their data. So yes, things are moving to the cloud in that aspect, but it's a cloud that we privately built for them and manage. So it's solely theirs. It's still a cloud type experience. Other customers are moving towards the cloud 100%, but that doesn't necessarily mean they have the expertise to do it themselves. And that is where the consulting portion comes in, not necessarily a break-fix play in that, but because of course the cloud environment itself is maintained by the provider, but getting onto that cloud and how they run it, that is a consulting / managed services play because, again, my example of end user who may want to put something up on the cloud doesn't necessarily have an IT shop that knows how to do that. And there's still opportunities there outside of a business analyst type of role.
Excellent points. Anyone else?
Well, yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead, Ian. I'll go after.
If you look at the industry trends, it's true that a lot of people are moving to the cloud or just, look, just as an example, in 2012, I think there was 330 million computers on the market that year, and there were 315 million people in the United States. So there was a little more than one computer per person. That trend is going down, but they're still making, I think in 2014, there were 300 million computers made. It's like, okay, yes, it's true that there are going to be less desktops and people are going to move to the cloud, and that trend is real and it is happening on a macro level. That being said, there's a lot of computers being made, so and they're going to need to be fixed somehow. So whether you want to manage them or you want to fix them when they break and react to it in a break-fix model, it's still going to exist. That being said, it's worth noting and it's worth thinking about being able to service other types of other things to be able to make up for the lost desktops that you might not have gotten.
All right, Pierre?
I have a kind of a unique perspective on that, being work for a company that offers services and products for both the private cloud, which is basically your own data center, and the public cloud with Microsoft Azure. I do not believe that there will ever be a time when we don't need IT services. As Scott mentioned, as Ian's mentioning, there's always going to be a need for somebody who does not know how to get there or how to architect the solution to take advantage of either cloud computing, the elastic capacity that cloud offers you. Because cloud basically is commoditizing IT or computer resources. You only pay for what you need, for what you use, when you use it. So there's always going to be a need for cloud, for IT. In terms of cloud, I think that in a lot of cases, like Scott mentioned, there's people that need to have their data local, and there's people that want to go to the cloud, and there are a lot of people that are in between, where some services will run in cloud, some services will run on premises, and the idea is to link those two to what we call the hybrid cloud, where you could have the database with all the data still staying on your premises in your own data center, but have the website that's the front end to it hosted in a cloud service so that it can burst to X amounts of instances at a moment's notice, or whenever the load requires it, and scale back down when the load goes away, without having to actually move the data. So that is very important, and most of the customers will not have the know-how on how to architect that, so IT will always be needed. Because really, cloud services is just whatever services you were running on premise, you've just moved it to somewhere where you've abstracted the hardware. You don't have to worry about that layer. You don't have to worry about the networking layer. You don't have to worry about the patching and everything else. It's done for you. It's part of the service. But there's still need. IT is still definitely a need. And I get that question a lot. Will cloud make me lose my job? And to that, I always answer, if your only job is to rack servers, then maybe. But if you're doing other things than just racking servers and running wires, then you're fine. And even if you're doing that, there's still going to need for on-premises requirements for that. They may not be as big, but there's still going to be a need for that. And that's where differentiating yourself and having a value proposition is really racking servers. There's probably 100 guys on the same block that can do it. So differentiate yourself is very important, again, just to tie into the conversation we had earlier.
The parallel I always draw to this is you look back and say, okay, the banks, you had tellers. ATMs came along. Does that mean the tellers are gone? No. Does that mean more jobs were created because now there are ATMs there and people have to stock them and people have to write their software and people have to support them and people have to do things? Yes. You just have to find the opportunity in what is presented to you. The fact that the cloud is there and that services are moving to the cloud does not eliminate your role. It allows you an opportunity to expand it in different ways. You just have to find that way that fits you.
It's also, I can't remember if it was in the question, but I think somebody said that break fix because the cloud will be gone. Break fix will only be gone in terms of turning the screwdriver. But in terms of actually fixing stuff, like when, for example, when Heartbleed happened, I needed to go get someone to fix that, and that's on my cloud servers. So that's something that's a very real case of break fix, even if you are cloud.
Well, and let's be perfectly honest. Cloud services not because the cloud services don't work, but customers do stupid things that make the cloud services not work too well, and so we've got to go in and recorrect those because they go, I don't know what I did.
Or when you ask the customer, what have you done, and they say, I didn't touch it.
Nothing.
I did nothing.
Isn't that what they always do?
Yeah. Have you ever dropped this laptop? Oh, no. Why is it cracked on the side then? All right. Let's move on to the next question. It says, what are the services you need to offer to be an MSP?
Realistically, for from my perspective, when you're talking as an MSP, there is, like I said, the differentiation between break fix. You can't just be give me money and then I will fix it when it breaks, because then why don't they just pay you when it breaks? Right. So you have to find ways to differentiate yourself. In general, the baseline to get to an MSP type of level, you're offering a managed and monitored type of service. So you have to have some level of monitoring so that you are proactively doing things in their network without them telling you. That is the very, very base minimum. Generally, at least on top of that, what we would add with our contracts, we have what we call, as I said, statements of effort or execution. So we will say, here are the things that I will do for you. I have a monitoring system. It does these things. I will look at these things weekly or daily or monthly. These things are outside of what would normally alert. I can tell by trends what your network is doing, what your systems are doing, how healthy they are, and I will try to preemptively repair them for you. That's the baseline of any managed service provider.
Good answers. All right. Anyone else got anything to add to that question? All right. Mark wants to know if we can put up a list of websites and books mentioned. And yeah, Corey, we'll work on that.
Sure.
Let's see. This is from Click a Geek. Does anyone offer a guarantee on malware removal, and where do you draw the line on reinfections?
Well, I'll take that one.
Okay.
Anytime I personally do a malware removal, I do give a 30-day guarantee, and I think that's pretty realistic and something that anybody that's competent in malware removal should be able to do. As far as where you draw the line, I kind of don't, because the reality is what a lot of techs do as their way of getting rid of malware is to run a bunch of scans, and one or multiple scans pick up something and say they cleaned it, and the reality is in a lot of cases they may have cleaned the obvious symptom but not the underlying cause, and so once a computer returned to service, it comes right back, and when it comes right back, it may not look like exactly the same one. But the point is, there are a lot of tentacles out there, and you may have cut off one or two of them, but if there's a few others left, my general feeling is if malware comes back within 30 days, yeah, it could be because the user did the same stupid thing that got them infected in the first place. But it's also just as likely that the tech didn't really get rid of it, ripping out by its roots. So bottom line, I think a 30-day guarantee on malware removal is doable, and I've never had one come back on me.
Okay. I think on malware removal, though, or malware in general, user education is key. I don't service customers on a day-to-day basis anymore, but I do do the IT support for my family and extended family. And I do have a nephew that keeps getting his laptop infected, and I keep telling him, don't go back to that site, that you're like, stop downloading illegal software, or if it's free, there may be a reason why they're giving it to you for free.
Absolutely.
And I don't disagree with that. Obviously, user education is important, but at the same time, as we all know, there are layers of protection that can be built in that the typical user, especially a home user, small business, doesn't have. They get a free antivirus program and think that means they can't get infected. And so I think to go a step beyond that, I will not install a free antivirus program on any client's computer. I say two things. For one, antivirus alone is not enough. You need an internet security suite with minimal firewall, malicious website detection, things like that. And there's no free program or combination of free programs that's adequate for that. So if you build in those layers of protection and along with some education, and say, if a message comes up saying, warning, don't go here, in most cases they'll still let you go there. So yeah, it requires some more education.
Well, I always tell people myself that, like Pierre was saying, free is not always free, right? Because you just paid me to fix your free problem.
Right.
Okay, let's see. Here we have another question. It says, all right, how to sell someone on remote access who is scared about it?
Okay,
Come on, Corey, that was softball.
Sorry, I was having a little side conversation with Chris there. I missed that for a second. All right. So in general, you don't usually go out to your customer and sell the remote support or remote access or whatever. You usually it's usually they call you up and they're either in a panic or they need something, or they're just asking you a question, and you say, you know what, I can fix that for you remotely. It's not so much a sell as just an option. And typically, when I first started, it was the number one objection that I heard was people want to bring me their computers. They want to see my face. They want to shake my hand. That has certainly changed over the years. Now,
Once they've seen your face.
What's that?
Once they've seen your face.
Once they've seen mine in particular. But yeah, like in terms of selling it to them, I mean, there might be people out there who actually go out and sell it. In general, in my experience from my customer conversations, it's not so much a sales pitch as, hey, can I fix this for you remotely? And I mean, Jeff, how do you sell it?
Again, I think you're right. A lot of times what will end up happening is if somebody's calling up and it's something that I can remote in and fix for them, or at least attempt that. Even the customers that are first-time customers, a lot of times the questions I get a lot of times are, or not even questions, the statements I get are, oh, I didn't even know you could do that. That's cool. Okay. And so for a lot of people, I don't really feel that. Now, I do a lot of, people bring me their computers because I prefer it that way in a lot of instances. And so, but even a lot of first-time customers, I mean, I've had customers who, I'll remote in their computer, I do a job, and I didn't ever ask them for unattended access, but sure enough, I'll get an email a short time later saying they gave me unattended access to their computer, which I don't really need, but for whatever reason. I guess a lot of times what I say is, if you really can't trust me by the conversation we're having on the phone, then you probably should use somebody else. So I hope I make customers feel comfortable in using me. And again, if you've got a website and they've called you, and again, this is why I always say I put a face on my website. A lot of people will agree or disagree with that, but at least to me it's a real person. I didn't put some great-looking telephone model on there going, "Hey, can I help you now?" But so there's differences for my small business. That's what I'm the go-between. I'm the person that's going to interact with that customer on a regular basis, and I want to create a relationship. For my level of business. So I don't really get a whole lot of people that go, no, I don't want you to do that. So
I used to get some of those people when I was at a repair shop. I mean, we had people every once in a while that were hesitant to do it just because it made them feel uncomfortable or whatever. And what we would tell them is, look, I can charge you an in-house rate instead of an on-site rate if you let me remote into your computer, because I can remote into more than one computer and deal with it on my own time because I'm sitting in my repair shop. So right. It's going to be cheaper for you if you let me remote into your computer instead of having to go out there. Because if I go out there, it's going to cost you $100 an hour.
Right.
Here, we used to charge a flat rate. So I would say,
right.
It's going to be a flat rate, this much money if I remote into your computers. And that alone, I mean, once you say that, all the hesitance is gone.
I do a pretty fair amount of remote support, but I can't think of any time it's ever been for anybody that wasn't an existing client. So there's already an established relationship. I've been to their home or their office, or they've come into my place, and they've got a problem or an issue, and I'll say, I can connect remotely, and there's never any issue there. But I can't think of any time that my initial contact to somebody I don't know that I haven't worked with in the past has asked for or that I've suggested remote connection.
Okay, so very good. Yeah, I'm just reading a question here. So, okay, here's a question. I'm sorry, it was a rewrite. All right, question. All right, you touched earlier on tools used by MSPs, whether they be open source or not. What would be your opinion on the current slew of RMM products out there? In our experience, there does not seem to be a sweet spot in any of the current offerings. We have been looking price, performance, features and consistency of the connection between the endpoint device and the management console. This has been the most thing is you still need a machine to access a cloud service, so there will always be traditional. Oh, no, I'm sorry, that's another question. So the slew of RMM products out there, I'm assuming this is going to you, Scott.
To be perfectly honest, we don't use an RMM product in our business. We
Okay, awesome.
We have open source tools for monitoring. We are in the process of migrating off of our open source tools for monitoring because we're to a point now where effectively our sales pitch can't be our open source is better than your open source. Playing in a little bit bigger market where we need to have a little bit of name recognition to grow to that next level of larger customer. So we are having to migrate off the open source for monitoring. For management, we use the traditional tools of we have a VPN tunnel from our NOC and our TAC area, our support areas, into the customer's environment. And from there, we use the traditional tools of just straight terminal services, SSH, web config if we need to get into different devices. We don't have a specific tool beyond our monitoring suite and the scripts that we wrote. So as to which RMM is better or what you're doing, it really would depend on what your customer base wants and what you're going to do. I don't have one for my customer base, and it's not really necessary for me. The customer base that I tend to work on, I'm taking over business from, say, a large company that may have had a suite of 10, 15 technicians. They service the servers in a specific way. I'm taking that over. I am doing some automation through the management, and when I automatically create tickets, I have some scripts that solve some of my easier problems, all in-house built. Outside of that, it's all my technicians logging in and doing the work they need to be done.
Excellent. Okay. Anyone else to add anything to that? No. Does anybody else use RMM tools?
I'm a little biased here, so I'm going to try to take everything out, all my bias out there. It sounds like you know what you're doing. That's not a common. So, the thing is, if you know how to use SSH and Telnet, and you know how to deal with cron jobs, and you are well equipped to deal with those issues, then sometimes it's easier to do it manually. A lot of the time it's easier to do it manually. Why pay $1,000 for a setup fee and $8 per seat when you can just do it yourself and you know what you're doing? But for a lot of people, it's hard to find talent to join their team that knows how to do those things.
I will have to say, stop you for a second, hard to find talent is a period problem. I have that all. And I totally agree with everything that you're saying.
I agree. It just seems like you've been able to achieve it. This is the only reason I said that. So I think that there is a place for tools that allow you to more easily get started and have technicians who maybe don't have all of those certifications that were mentioned earlier, because they can still be useful as technicians even if they're not as experienced. You just have to give them the tools that allow them to negate that lack of experience. And so I think that's where those tools come in. At the same time, I understand the frustration. I talk to MSPs and repair shops who are trying to get into the MSP business all the time, and everybody's frustrated about how many RMM tools there are, and how difficult it is to find one that fits their needs, and how difficult it is to even which fit their needs, because all these RMM companies, when you go to their websites, are very cryptic about what they offer and what the features are and how much they cost, and you have to call them on the phone. And it's a very frustrating process, and I understand that. And personally, I think they're all horrible, but again, I'm biased. We make software, and I kind of find it a little bit ridiculous that some of them only work in Internet Explorer. I just don't think there's much of an excuse for some of the archaic technology that's being used, and there are exceptions to that, of course. There are some solutions that are perfectly fine, but I think for the most part, there's a lot of catch-up to do, and it's not being done quick enough.
And to clarify my earlier statements, I said this is the way we do it, and this isn't necessarily the best way for everyone. It's just I had to state I don't have an opinion as to what's the best RMM because I don't use any of them.
And I'll say real quick that the thing is, a lot of these RMM tools that are out there will give you, they'll either give you a demo or a trial, and you have to try them out. And I will tell you this: are you going to find one tool that is going to fit all your needs? Absolutely, 100% no. It's not going to happen. So you got to think outside of that a little bit and go, what is it that I'm needing to fill here, and how do I best do that, and what's going to get me to the closest way that I want to support my customer. And then there might be some other things I know people who are using different tools like that to do different things for different customers, it works for their model. So you've got to look at those things, and your business will vary, and you've got to figure that out for yourself, for again who you're supporting. All right.
Sorry, I want to touch on something that Scott said earlier in the show. The build it and they will come model, where you go and you buy a PSA and an RMM and a whole bunch of other things. I've seen a lot of guys get themselves into trouble with that. You've got to make sure that you are buying what you need and fits with your vision for your company.
Yep. And sometimes I've said this. Listen, I honestly believe this. Software sucks to learn. It just does. There's no easy way to learn software. So you have to load it up. You've got to get in there, and you've got to get your hands dirty to understand what it does, how it does it, and how it's going to best serve you. If you just think that you're going to load something up and hey, this is just going to work, it doesn't work like that. Not anything I've seen.
To further that point, like I said, we're in the process of replacing our monitoring software. This was 7 months in choosing a new piece of software, and will probably take us 6 to 8 months in deployment. So the cycle in software is not easy.
Yeah, excellent. So yeah, that kind of furthers my point there.
Yeah.
You got to take the time, and that's what it comes down to. All right, next question. This is kind of a question statement. It says, thing is, you will need a machine to access the cloud service, so there will always be traditional support. And we kind of touched on that. Yes, there always will be traditional support, whether it be machines that are breaking, hard drives that are dying, or whatever. A lot of people, I will say this, a lot of people say that, hey, my laptop only cost me $300, and it's going to charge me. You're going to charge me $150 to fix it. And to that I say, number one, you really shouldn't be buying a $300 laptop, because, in my opinion, they're junk. And the reason I say that is, yeah, you can get a $300 laptop, but your computing experience will vary. And if you drop it off the couch or counter or whatever, and it smashes into 1,000 pieces, replacing parts on that is very expensive, and most of the time not worth it. So if you spend a little bit more money for those machines, they'll go a little bit farther. But things always happen with electronics and mechanical things, so there's always going to be somebody that's going to service those. And like we said earlier, even software and cloud, there's always got to be somebody that's going to figure those things out, because a lot of people can't, and that's what we do. We come in and we look at what needs to be fixed, and we figure out how to fix it. So
well, your analogy for your $300 laptop is that you can buy yourself a Kia, and it'll drive you fine to and from work. You can't take it on a NASCAR or an F1 track. It just doesn't work that way.
Right. Exactly. There you go.
You have to buy what you need to do what you need to do.
Exactly. Very cool. All right. So another question, it says, along with the MSP tools question, what billing tools are you using, and how are you getting your receivable down to a reasonable level? Are you integrating with anything other than QuickBooks? I hate QuickBooks. I didn't say that. That was part of the question. But I do hate QuickBooks. Full disclosure. Along with the MSP tools, what billing tools are you using, and how are you getting your receivables down to a reasonable level?
A good accountant.
Yeah.
Frankly, I can't really speak much to this question. We have Great Plains, and we have an accounting department, and that takes care of everything for us. So for the smaller businesses, I know that there are cloud services. Some of my friends who I am de facto networks businesses have different tools. I'm just not a party to that. So.
Gotcha.
That actually goes back to one of the things that we didn't talk about earlier, and the difference between MSPs and break fix. Break fix, I get paid when work's done. MSPs receivables can be an issue.
I This is for Chris actually from Remote Support Tech Team, who's one of the mods. I think his wife actually does some of the bookkeeping stuff. It might be a good idea to reach out to him. And I'm not sure, but Chris can answer that question.
Yeah, and you know, one of the things I actually use I use Repair Shopper, and for a lot of my billing and stuff like that. Now, with that, even though I can use QuickBooks with Repair Shopper and it does integrate, I'm still using an Excel spreadsheet, and I know every time I do, I just want to stick a fork in my eye, and yeah, it's very painful, and I will change over eventually, but it's still manageable enough, so it is getting to the point where it's getting kind of a little bit out of hand, and I will have to switch over some. But again, it goes back to the software, right? I've got to learn it, I've got to understand it, I've got to be able to use it, or like we talked about in the beginning of the show, I've got to hire somebody, you know, whether it be a contract basis or whatever, to be able to do that for me so that I don't have to do it and I can do what I'm good at, right? All right. Next question is this is from Frank G. Let's see. I would be more confident in what the gentleman from Microsoft is saying in the business side if Microsoft didn't cut the IT provider from reselling the Surface or ending the small business server program too abruptly without caring about the people that built their business around it. Pierre, I'm sure that's to you.
I think so.
And that's not a softball.
That's not a softball. There's many ways to answer this one. Are we cutting out the small guys for not reselling the Surface? I have really no visibility into that side of the equation. The Microsoft, as you know, is a behemoth that has many silos, and the hardware section does what the hardware section needs to do. So in terms of, are they cutting out, like I know at the beginning, when we first started with the Surface a long time ago, this wasn't supposed to become a business. It was supposed to be a kind of a prototype to show OEMs like the Dells, the HPs, the Acers, like all of the manufacturers out there of what we saw as one possible vision for a convertible, so a laptop that becomes a tablet that you can use for both. And it actually took off. So the first one was okay, the second one was a little better. The third one, which is the one I'm talking to you on now, is absolutely fantastic. I would actually put a fork in my eye if I had to go back to a regular laptop. So are we cutting out the middleman or the small people? I don't know. I really don't know. In terms of the small business product, yes, I feel your pain. I have heard that refrain many times over the past year, or since we announced that small business server was not going to continue as a product bundle. What we're suggesting is server essentials with an Office 365 license, where you get your Office products, you get your mailbox, you get your SharePoint all online, so that there's less requirements for on-site management. Now, for the customer, it can be good. For the implementer or the service provider, there's two sides to that coin. Is one, if you're not monetizing or if you're not selling that Office 365 product to your customers, then you may end up losing a little bit of business because they're going directly to Office 365 and they're paying directly Office 365, so you can lose a little bit of that. We have programs that allow service providers to resell and then monetize those services, which then become a recurring revenue stream. In terms of small business server itself, I have my own personal opinion on it, which I am not at liberty to discuss. But yeah, I do understand what the frustration is, because it's one of those where it's there, it's working. On the other end, it'll still be supported for the 10 years, of 5 years of mainstream support, 5 years of extended support, like any of our other products. So, sorry, I don't know what else to tell you. It's like I said, it's not a softball, but there's no easy answers to that one.
Well, and I will tell you from, a support aspect of a lot of these things. Here's the thing that's kind of frustrating when it comes to small, medium businesses, and I understand there's different budgets and things like that, but a lot of times the IT budget is the last thing that a business owner thinks about. And I'll be quite honest, most businesses, small, medium, or otherwise, are keeping their equipment for way too long, and they want it supported forever, and that's just not realistic in today's society. And even from a standpoint of, the Office 365 is a great product. Yes, it's a recurring revenue, and yes, it's something you have to pay for on a regular basis, but that's the way things are going. And a lot of the other small businesses have had to, do that model also in order to stay in business, because these days of, we're gonna sell you a one-time fee, and it's going to support you for the next 20 years is just unrealistic, or 10 years, whatever. And so I think there's a lot to be said for that. Is yes, things change, and we don't see from the outside what things are actually being used, and a lot of times we might think that things are being used a lot more than they actually are. And so you got to kind of take a look at that, and who's going to support what if it's not really being used. In a lot of those things, again, I don't know. I'm just saying, I'm just speculating out there and saying that, we don't know a lot of the stuff that goes into that. And, quite honestly, I would rather see people like Microsoft kind of pare down what they actually do and have something that is going to, support a lot of different things across, the field, instead of having, hundreds of different products that I go, I'm confused. I don't know what to get.
Yep. And let me put a little bow on this topic. When you talk about support and you talk about people keeping machines on for much longer than that machine was originally planned or designed to be, Server 2003 is a wonderful example of that. 2003, 2015, that's like really 12 years. But because of SP, the service packs and so on, so the clock stops. Is it 15 days from now?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, it's coming up quick.
It's coming up really, really quick. And there's still a very high percentage of small, medium businesses that are still running on 2003. So for your audience, for our audience right now, this is a gold mine. You'll go to your product and charge them for migrating them to a modern platform. That being said, we're pretty much the only company out there that will support our enterprise products for up to 10 years. So 5 years of mainstream support, 5 years, followed by 5 years of extended support, and extended supports includes all security patches. You look at some of the open source, and like Satya, our illustrious leader, have said many, many times in the past year, we love open source. We love Linux. A high percentage of workloads on Azure are actually running open source. However, if you look at, I'll take an example, is Firefox, or their support model is the minute they release a new version, the previous version is no longer supported. So if you're in an enterprise, how can you do that? So there are pros and cons to everything. We try to use a model that will fit everyone, and that is predictable. We got to that model in 2001 based on feedback we got from the industry saying that we needed to be more predictable in terms of how long we can support specific products. And that's when we came up with the 5+5 model. 5 years of standard support, which includes patches, functionality patches, security patches, hot fixes of any kind, and then followed with 5 years of security patches only.
Yeah,
so, yes,
that's a long time, to be honest with you. In technology years, it's like a bazillion years.
Yeah. If you bought a cat when you deployed your first 2003 server, your cat is most likely dead.
Exactly. There was a comment in the chat room from Renactus. It says, initially I was mad with the removal of SBS, but now I love the idea. I resell Office 365, and I no longer have the headache of Exchange on the box. So there you go. There's another happy customer. So it comes back to a mindset, right? I think a lot of us need to change our mindsets of, okay, just because you've been doing something just like your grandfather since 1945. It doesn't matter. Times change. We're not there are no LPs. And for people that there are no records, basically. There really are no CDs anymore, rarely any. We've moved into a digital model, and things change, and sometimes we have to change with the times, and that's okay. Learn how to make it work for you. You can sit there and get mad all day long, and that's fine. That's up to you. But this is old military, but I always look for a way around the problem. That's just the way I operate. And I find that it works better for me that way because, things do make me mad, but I just can't spend time being mad about things like that. So, does anybody else have anything to add to that on the whole?
To be perfectly honest, as a comparison against servers and network for this same topic, our large telco providers that we support, we're ripping out and replacing their cores every 3 years. So every 3 years, it's a new technology.
And I 100% agree with that because I was just telling somebody the other day, my production machine that I'm on right now, hand-built myself, it's getting close to 3 years. It's not quite there yet, and I'm already getting the itch. And it's funny because there's really not anything to move up into. So I'm kind of like, it still works, but I'm like, but I would kind of like something maybe a little bit faster. So, anyways, first world problems. Another question we have here, it says, has mobility enablement, smartphones and tablets, provided net new opportunities to IT consultants, or has that opportunity passed? Has the cloud surpassed mobility as an opportunity? I'm not sure.
I think I understand what he's saying.
Okay.
Because mobility, in a sense, has removed some opportunities if you consider the fact that people have used less desktops and replace those with mobile devices, right?
Okay.
So if you say that has removed some opportunities from technicians, I think the question, and correct me if I'm wrong, is the net number of jobs more because there are opportunities with mobile? And I personally, coming back to the RMM thing, I don't think anybody's really figured out a good way for MSPs or repair shops to get revenue from mobile. There's definitely some interesting things out there for managing Android or iPhone or tablets, but I personally haven't found anything that is too impressive outside of like being able to manage apps and things like that, being able to remotely wipe. But there isn't anything in particular that's impressed me all that much. That being said, I'm a little bit out of the game. Don't do too much research, but I suspect there's some good stuff out there.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say there are lots of MDMs, and I think this is probably what you were about to say, which is I think Office 365 has an MDM in it, or
it's called Intune.
Intune, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and it allows you to manage Android, iOS, Windows devices, whether they're phones or disconnected laptops or tablets.
Cool. I'm not familiar with it. I'll check that out.
I do think that there's an opportunity that's both cloud and mobility that's out there for everybody in terms of managing of mobile devices. It's getting our customer base to understand that what's important is the identity of the person that's connecting and using the data and the applications. So managing the identities and assigning rights and privileges to that identity is key, because Millennium generation will connect using a phone, will connect using a tablet. They'll go home and use either a Mac at home or a Mac at home or a Android on the road or in a PC at work. the platform itself doesn't really matter anymore that much. It matters as how you identify that person and say that person is allowed to do this. They're allowed to join an untrusted machine to the environment. At the join time, some certificate gets put in, some controls get put in, so that the information, the data that is being used on those devices is now secure. So you, as the customer, if you decide that that contractor is now fired, revoke that certificate, and all that information that's stored there suddenly is useless and can't be accessed. That's the opportunity. That's the opportunity that management MSPs can leverage in order to enable their customers to move into a mobile workforce while leveraging cloud services.
Very
In
cool.
the same vein as a managed service play in this, it is a larger play. You do have to have a larger customer to run this with, but there is a much opportunity on the security side of both mobile and any kind of desktop within the environment. Not only what rights does a customer have or does a user have there, but what is that user doing, and when is that user doing something outside of what they normally do. It's a play that is common in a lot of SIM type of solutions, where you're looking at security monitoring and preventative monitoring of what the end user is doing and how to defend against that.
So I'm sorry, I'm curious about this. So you're saying you're watching what the user does and you alert on that, as opposed to on events on the actual device itself?
Correct. There are two current models. There's the traditional SIM model, which is actually a rules and signature based model. They're large behemoths of programs that sit there, collect logs, collect data, collect everything that you can dump at it, and they look for specific signatures or different things so that you can say this user or someone is doing something that is abnormal. That only works when you're actually looking for what you know. There are a newer generation of these tools that are coming in that you can actually monitor, manage, and play with that are basically computer learning. So the coolest one that I've seen and have demoed and played with lately, it's actually called Darktrace. It's out of the UK. It's Bayesian regression algorithms, and it effectively literally takes data off the wire. It'll dump everything into what the user is doing. It then, because it is grabbing everything off the wire, can take your AD authentications, different things like that, and say, I now know, based on the AD authentication, that this user on this mobile is the same as this user on this desktop. I now group them together. I know this is Corey. Now that I know this is Corey, I watch what Corey does. And hey, 2 weeks later, Corey's doing something that Corey hasn't done before. Should I alert on this or not? Well, maybe the something that Corey has been doing is that Corey's on a Saturday doing what Corey normally does during the weekdays, so I'll ignore that. But maybe it's Corey is transferring a bunch of files that he normally doesn't access. I'm going to alert on that. It's those type of plays that gather everything in together, all the data out there. It's almost like, I hate using the key phrases and words, but it's a big data play. It's gathering everything that's out there, looking at it, and finding a way to actually use it.
Man, that is creepy.
That's really cool.
You should see this program.
What's the category of product called again?
It's insane. SIEM is what you're looking for. It's SIM. It's security monitoring and management. That program in particular, if you want to look at their website, it has beautifully done graphically. It's all an HTML5 website. You see the data streams that flow between. You can drill down on them. It is impressive beyond impressive, and that particular one is called Darktrace.
And is this at a price point that folks who have
Probably
less than $2 million revenue?
This one I don't even want to play in if I can help it. But if I can get it installed in a large managed customer and work with it, hey, great. There are much smaller SIMs that most of them, as I said, are more rules-based. When you get into computer-based learning, it's very expensive.
Actually, that's something that's built into Azure. For example, if you have a Hotmail or a Outlook.com email account and you log on, let's say I'm in Ottawa right now and I log on in Ottawa, if within 5 minutes I remote desktop into a machine that's in Florida and I try to log on to my account from that machine learning in Azure, because it's our Outlook and Hotmail services are housed on Azure, we'll think about it and say, okay, you've just logged on to the same service from two different geography location that I know you can't travel to and from in the amount of time it took you to log out from one place and log into the other. So I'm going to assume that that account has been compromised, and I'm going to request that you confirm that you are who you say you are by either two-factor authentication or sending a code to a cell phone or something like that. That's all built into it right now.
Very cool. All right, I got a follow up to the statement earlier for Microsoft, and I got another question for you, Pierre. This is a follow up. This from Frank G. Also, he says, "Thanks for the answer. Didn't mean to make my question such a hardball. The question was not meant as a slight to progress. Just that I thought Microsoft should treat their partners better. We were left without the hint of a roadmap for quite a while, and not having a plan can be a big problem for a business." And I agree that not just Microsoft but other companies too, sometimes getting the information out in a timely manner is not always done. I do agree that that is a problem in the industry as a whole, especially, and Pierre, you can probably, the larger the company, the harder it is to see what the left hand is doing and what the right hand is doing. So
often our partners find out things that before I do.
That's a
You know what? I hope you don't mind me sharing this story, Pierre. But we found when we were making our modern app, we found a bug in Windows. We reported it, and what I thought was really cool is the following week I was in Rochester at meeting with one of your colleagues, and I apologize, I can't remember his name right now, and he told me about the bug that we had reported. So clearly the left hand sometimes knows what the right hand is doing. He's like, yeah, we just heard about this last week, so I was very impressed by that.
Nice, very cool. All right, and I think this is probably the last question we'll go through. It's this is from Irud IT Matt. Okay, it's just UK clients, and this is for Office 365, is just UK clients with constant issues. And let me follow that up with, we have issues with licensing our Office products. We also no details from Microsoft on how we can sell it or how we can manage it. There's no single portal for partners, or is it a single portal per client? This is for Office 365. Yeah, exactly. Sorry, I didn't mean to make that so complicated because I was reading three of them together. So
yeah, I know that there are some issues in terms of how partners are being serviced. We have the managed accounts, so the very large partners, and we have the smaller partners. And large partners have an easy way of getting that information by going to their partner account manager. Smaller partners typically don't have that luxury because they're small, and we don't have enough partner account managers to support 1 million small business partners in the industry. But through the partner portal, there should be in there a way for you to ask those questions and to get those answers. I don't have those answers. I am not focused on Office 365. There's our website or our blog, which is canitpro.net. You can go in there. You'll see my face and my partner's Anthony Bartolos, and says contact the author. Send us an email. If you can't find the info, we will get something back to you. I can't guarantee you we're going to reply on the same day because, as Corey knows, we're just two of us to cover all of Canada, so we're traveling a whole lot, and I may be in an airport for the next 2 days or something like that. But if I can, I will help. I don't have the answers right now, and I'm sorry to say, but I want to be completely transparent.
I think that's excellent, and I thank you for that somebody can contact you that way. And yeah, definitely do that, and then let us know if that helps resolve some issues. And a lot of these things are basically a learning curve, right? We've got to learn how to implement things, and it's not always apparently easy, and hopefully they can get some answers to some of those questions. So.
Or maybe we go back to the first segment of our show where we talked about community and help getting somebody, because I saw somebody earlier that said that they were very happy with the way they were reselling it. Maybe that person can talk to the person who's having problems trying to figure out a way to resell it, and the two of them can help each other.
And I will tell you, so we're looking at, so the person from the U.S. wasn't having any problems, but the person from the U.K. was the one that was having the problems. So that might be an issue there that, one was really happy and one was like, hey, this is not a real easy process. So in that, and we all know, well, maybe not everybody, licensing is a bear in this industry, period. I don't work for a big company or anything like that, but I mean, I just know when you're licensing across borders, it's a whole different ball game that I don't even understand, but I just know that it goes on behind closed doors. Okay, I think that is the end of the questions, and I think we are well over time, and I think we've had a good show and a lot of good questions. And I just wanted to let you guys know to join us next week, and we'll talk about hiring the right people for your business, where to find great techs, and more. And appreciate everyone that has stayed around and answered questions or asked questions so that the panel could answer them. And we just appreciate your guys' time and hope you got something out of this. And thanks. Have a great week. We'll see you next Monday.